idea of providing urban amenities.
I want decentralized development in this country.
If you do it, then at least plan for the poor to come into the cities.
The idea was to, have a conversation between different perspectives, people who hold different perspectives on the Indian economy, why there's a sense of anxiety and gloom, why we've been brought to the pass that we are in right now. And to suggest ways to improve the situation, to go back to some of the euphoria of 2008-2009, but even more fundamentally to ask whether this is an opportunity to rethink some of the big economic planning, economic approaches there has been to this country, whether it's time almost for a 1991 kind of bold restructuring of our approach to the Indian economy, and what that fundamental rethinking and multi-pronged approach needs to be. So some of the broad areas we want to look at, of course, is industry and manufacturing, but also at employment, at agriculture, social sector spending, and the environment, which are the broad areas of concern for all of us.
Environment means what?
Environmental, just concerns, where industry sees environmental requirements as being adversarial, and there's a whole section of society that sees it as fundamental to any industrial enterprise. So just let me start with you, Tarun. And this is a question I think that we'll ask all of you just to set the parameters of the conversation. That what do you think, if you were to pick two reasons why we are in the kind of depressed state of economy, where your GDP numbers have fallen, you have absolutely jobless growth, and there is a great sense that it's going to be difficult to turn it around. If you were to pick 2 or 3 key reasons why we have reached this milestone, what would they be?
I think we got complacent as a country. We had amazing growth for several years, crossed 9%, and we took our eye off the ball. I think after the 2009 elections, we thought that 9% was our birthright, almost, forgetting that we actually lived in the 3% era for 40 years or whatever. And the world was in crisis, and we thought we were out of that crisis. We were not part of that. So I think that was a very fundamental. We took our eye off the ball. We didn't focus on the economy the way we should do. Right. So this is the broad thing. The second thing for me is I feel in this country, and which is coming back in other countries, the public sector is a huge part of our economy. Very big part of our economy. And we have actually allowed it, or almost deliberately brought it down. But the public sector can fuel growth, because it's such a large part of our economy, and so much of the private sector is a supplier into the public sector. So that's the second part. I think we have not nurtured, we're not looked after the public sector as we should have done. Even now, one of my key solutions for driving growth back is the public sector, which is sitting on huge cash, which is concerned with a lot of construction and infrastructure projects like Highway Authority, railways, the DMIC project. This would all generate economic activity. This is all public sector. This is all government.
The first point that you made, just to clarify and be sure, that when you say complacent, do you think we sort of got our eye off the ball from a reform standpoint, or did we just approach economic growth the wrong way?
No, I think we just took my feeling is we took our eye off the ball of economic growth. We just assumed that we've got it, we've made it. Now there is never, as these gentlemen who are in companies will tell you, there is never an end to improving, and going on working in your companies so in the same thing in the economy. I think we took our eye off the ball. We focused a lot, rightly, on social reforms and social development issues, But we seem to be, Harsh may have a different view. From the economic point of view, they seem to be more focused on social issues, definitely not on economic issues. But economy is necessary to support social development also. The two are connected. We should have 10% growth where social and economic reforms converge.
We'll come back to some of this because some of what you're saying is contentious, and also that when you're talking of public sector, are you saying that in fact we should not have disinvested as much as we have?
No, we should disinvest because it's important for the public of India to own the public sector. The public sector doesn't mean it should be owned by the government. The public sector should be owned by the people of India, and I'm all for disinvestment and more disinvestment. But we are not driving growth in the public sector. We are not managing those public sector companies properly. The Department of Heavy Industry and the Ministry of Industry used to be a titan in the old days. You know, BHEL and so many of the top public sector companies are there. Never hear of it. What are they doing? You know.
There was also no competition as such. I mean, from the private sector, which sort of created a vibrant sort of industry, went beyond just those 5 big ones. But I think the point that Mr. Das is making, Mr. Munjal, we'd really like to know your view. How do you define government taking its eye off the ball? I mean, really, what are the contours of that argument? If you agree, and if you disagree, then what do you believe?
I think there are 2 aspects. I actually completely agree with what Tarun is saying first. In 2008, we seemed to have handled the crisis so well that we felt, everything is hunky-dory here. And we also forgot how connected we are to the rest of the world. Because the rest of the world did not handle it well, by the way, the same crisis. And the assumption was our demographics and the momentum we built will take care of everything else. 2008 to 12, if you see policy making in this period of 4 years, was actually dismal. We did not make the moves which are necessary. They were actually staring us in the face. And we had assumed, and by the way, there used to be said in those days, that India is now on a growth path. Even if you do nothing, you cannot go below 6%. Remember that, Tarun? That used to be a comment which was made frequently in those days. And now we're talking about 5%, 5.2, is it going to be 5.5, etc. We made 2 big mistakes, I think. One is forgetting that this is a machine, this is a big ship. It needs constant movement, it needs attention, at least for the next 20 to 30 years. We need attention because we have a unique problem, unlike many others. We have 250 million people who don't get 2 square meals a day. And the only answer is growth. I cannot imagine any other way we can actually tackle this. And the growth will actually come from the points you're making. The industry and the economy needs to get the attention, it needs to have growth, it needs to create jobs. And today, with the kind of regulation you have, whether it's the Industrial Disputes Act, whether it's the labor policy, whether it's the Contract Act, whether it's the Acquisition of Land Act, it actually discourages large industry coming up in India. It certainly discourages large employment.
Mr. Munjal, one always hears this argument about industry will bring employment. But actually, pretty much all the numbers, and it's accepted wisdom now, that these blistering years of growth brought jobless growth, if not negative growth.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying, Shoma.
But why would that be?
This is the point I'm making. That our policy today is designed in a manner, let me just give you a few numbers. There is 6% odd number of people who are employed who are actually in jobs in India. 94% are self-employed. And there's less than 1% which is actually unionized labor. Unionized labor has actually driven a lot of our policy for many, many years. Now, which is not bad by itself. If the policy was conducive to growth, it would be fine. But today what it is doing is it's scaring people away from hiring people. When people plan a new business, they're trying to see how much automation can I put in so that I can get the least number of people to do the same job. That's not what we should be doing in a country like India.
But are you saying, I wonder if only the policy is where the hiccup is really.
Not only,
I mean, it's high mechanization is in fact, built into big industry. You will, because it will be cheaper, and that is the intrinsic logic of big manufacturing or big industry. So
I'm not suggesting it's not required. By the way, we need very, very high efficiency. We need to be able to compete with the entire world. It doesn't matter if a business is importing, exporting or not, but anything we do must be globally competitive. That's the only way to build full strength in your system. That's the only way to ensure that you genuinely are able to create the kind of jobs and therefore the savings and therefore the consumption. It's a virtuous cycle. That's what you're aiming for.
Okay. No, you go ahead.
Because just one more.
Yeah.
Because the social reform bit which happened, by the way, it had two very interesting elements. Big resistance in the early days from industry, but very quickly industry realized you're also building a massive market. If you can actually turn this on its head, you can truly build the world's largest growth market and take care of the problem of poverty in India, both at the same time.
When you say social reform, are you referring to social spending?
Some of them were very, very sensible.
Which ones?
I think we've handled it, I don't think we've handled it well. You look at Narega, for example. Narega, on the one hand, has brought millions of people actual jobs and monies in their homes. But dole is never a good idea for long term. It also has a completely different aspect that today both the farms and the factories in Haryana, in Punjab, in other places which used to get labor from UP, Bihar, etc., are not able to get people. Okay? And it's just changed. The entire cost of doing business in India actually has significantly moved up. What we've not used Narega for is skilling people.
Exactly.
And that's a shame.
Yeah, but that's
Just to pursue this thought a little further, that when you're saying that these areas cannot get labor anymore, was the construct itself exploitative? So that now when they're just getting baseline wages,
Yep.
industry or people find it inconvenient, but maybe that one has to rethink business or rethink enterprise, rethink your balance sheet so that it will
Absolutely we do.
involve a baseline wages.
No, absolutely we do, by the way. I don't think there's any doubt about that. What I'm saying is there are two different aspects. One is getting people to run those factories. It's like China, where China is in the next 10 years. We keep talking about China as this big factory. They just won't have the people. Their population is going to fall off a cliff. We are creating that. There's a social change taking place in this construct right now. And which is not, as I said, there's also a good aspect to it. People are able to live in their homes, live with their families, which is a wonderful thing to do. But by giving people dole, you're telling them, by the way, you don't necessarily need to go out and skill yourself. You don't necessarily need to go and do a job.
You're reducing the ability, employment versus employability. At the end of the day, these people are not going to be skilled.
And you can check dole in 30 different countries, how it's worked.
The word dole, of course, is something that's going to get much more discussed. Let's just come to Jayati. That if you were to pick the 2-3 big reasons why we are in this current sort of mess, gloom about the Indian economy, what would you pick?
Well,
we'll go into deeper conversations about
Sure.
Yeah, let me put it this way. I don't think that this was a strategy that could have carried on indefinitely in any case. It was bound to run its course. It's coming towards the end of this particular course right now. And that's because this is a strategy that was based fundamentally on the notion that growth is the most important thing, irrespective of whether it delivers employment, etc., etc. That growth can only come from private corporate investment. Therefore, at all costs, you have to incentivize private corporate investment. And this is more or less what we've just heard. That's who will deliver it.
And public sector.
No, you've said, let me come back to that
to
one.
it.
Yes. So this was the strategy. In fact, the strategy was not public sector. The strategy was that the private corporates will deliver. Now, in the process of incentivizing, that meant you had to offer fiscal incentives, tax holidays to various sectors, all kinds of taxes forgone in every budget. You had to offer resource incentives, land, water, spectrum, you name it. Today we call it crony capitalism, but in fact it was part of a broad macroeconomic strategy. And you had to accept inequalities. You also, because you were giving away all those concessions, you then said you don't have money to do all the other basic stuff, which is deliver the social and economic rights of the citizens. Whether it is in basic housing or education or just simple things like roads to every village or health or electricity or you name it, we are really low in terms of any of these deliveries. Okay? We also never saw wages and employment as anything other than a cost. We didn't see it as a market. I'm very delighted that Mr. Munjal has realized it's a market. We didn't see the significance of raising productivity at the bottom. Productivity increases are always for the top. Whereas, in fact, if you raise average levels of productivity, the simplest, fastest, most effective way is to actually raise the productivity at the bottom, to which we had given no focus at all. So this was, and of course, the cheap resources in turn means that you end up desecrating your environment. It means that you end up having pollution, degradation, etc., etc. Along which you do not also do what I call the essence of development, which is the structural transformation of your workforce. Moving people out of low productivity to higher productivity activities. You don't do that. So
You should do that?
Of
or-
course you should, but you're not doing it as part of this strategy. This is not a strategy. The 25 years of growth we have had has not given us any structural change.
One of the really big issues is management in this country. I don't mean management of industry, even just management.
Just
of,
sheer governance.
Just management
I
and
think we should
government.
come
And
back to that.
leadership.
And we need reinforcements from outside. I don't think we can leave it to the people who are in the government.
No,
I've
absolutely.
worked with them all my life. They probably have a good idea what to do, but they don't know how to do it. And we need to get people in who know how to do it, how to implement. You know, whatever we need to do, we are short of talent in the government.
But what
in
is that
India.
way? You know, that's what was my
Why aren't we bringing
fundamental
corporate
question.
culture into government? Where
Then you have to have a blood
Corporate
transfusion, no?
necessarily.
No, just
You need-
accountability, because
Yeah.
corporates
It's
have
a
accountability.
combination of accountability and flexibility. Because both are very lacking in the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
How to do it, cost overruns must not be there, time overruns must not be, and it's possible. This is same people, we're the same people who are
And
achieving
people
it
should be
outside
outside of
government, but not
government.
outside.
Incentives
People
are
should be
different.
accountable. I mean,
The incentives are different.
if you're running an ICDS program for
You should
40
have
years
performance-based salary in government.
Yeah.
But you know, tell me, I mean, Tamil Nadu, actually, I don't know why everybody does not look at Tamil Nadu much more. Yes, the top is corrupt, etc., but everything works. Every public
Where?
system works. Tamil
Yeah,
Tamil Nadu.
the healthcare
The
system,
healthcare
is
system
brilliant.
works.
In spite of.
PDS is brilliant.
Brilliant.
PDS works, Anganwadis work, education works.
Actually, Chhattisgarh, I'm opposed to Raman Singh's
Yeah,
human
but-
rights,
but
but his
this-
PDS works.
It's
But what is
fantastic.
in, but in
Yeah.
Tamil Nadu, every single public service delivery works. Now,
Absolutely.
why are we not studying what makes them work?
It's interesting that Jayati brought that up because, you know, that Mr. Purnalingam, who's done a lot of the healthcare system, was actually approached by the UP government to come and see if they could replicate that. And apparently Akhilesh Yadav wanted him to come, but there was just no way anybody else in the UP cabinet would let that happen because of the vested interests in professionalizing the entire
But you know, I
healthcare
think
system.
it's partly professionalizing, but it is also, shall I say, the overall social culture
Yeah.
of a state. So it's more than just a technocratic solution.
But Jyoti, even
You know?
then, see what Chhattisgarh did to PDS
Yes.
is something that
Absolutely.
is so dramatic.
And here is where
to
IT
the
can make a
Mithani
difference.
and to the Mithani program. But initially it was the way, because I worked in Chhattisgarh, and if anyone told me that it will run the best PDS in the country, I would have said you're
Stark raving man.
stark raving
Yeah.
man. It was really, and the imaginative solutions, I mean, they've done a range of things, and that's outside today's discussion, but the fact that they did, when they decided they wanted to do it, and they set around a whole set of reforms, of which technology was one, but they deprivatized the retail shops, they built transparent systems, they made sure that the last
The economic weighing, and the
and all of
monitoring.
that. But before getting to the governance issues, which I think I'd like to come back to, I just wanted to not lose sight of
Sorry, just 1 minute. Maybe just get me a hot
water
thing,
or
please,
something.
and something in my throat.
didn't want to lose sight to one last strand, I think, in the earlier discussion, that even if we believe in private sector led growth, let us remember that the private sector is also the street vendor.
Yes,
and,
I wanted
and
to
so
say
on. So-
that as well.
So
Absolutely.
and because I've been recently working on the street vendors bill, it really struck me at the very time that Parliament was debating, and it's such a big issue about multi-brand retail. What about the tiniest retail? And if deregulation is our conviction, then much more so for the at least
Exactly.
equally for the street vendor. The
Yeah.
street vendor's regime. Just to illustrate, the street vendor actually with no help from anybody is providing
Self-sufficient,
cheap retail. There are many advantages. They've said the kind of just the kind of produce of the poor which is made available, cheap retail to even the middle class, etc. Creative use of the economy, large numbers of the poor being employed. There has been
Very low
zero deregulation. In fact, it's got even worse. Just to illustrate, Mumbai, for instance, has about 2 lakh street vendors. They just arbitrarily, the municipality fixed a limit, saying we will license 14,000, just like that. Now, if you have made illegal the overwhelming majority of the less than 10% of them are legal. Then you have the hafta. Then you have the kind of harassment these days, the street vendors are there. Somebody got killed very recently in Mumbai itself, in eviction drives and so on. And so I'm saying that please let us remember that if you have faith in the private sector led model, at least include everyone in the private sector.
That's right.
And that's another big gap in the economy, and have conviction to do it. So we had suggested a street vending law which would actually have reformed this, and it was really interesting what the bureaucracy did to that law, which actually brought it back completely to status quo, which with this arbitrary fixing of limits, land use. If you say okay, I'm okay with street vendors, but let them go to Bhavana and sell. It's not going to happen. And the whole idea of natural markets, etc. And that's only one example of many. The rag pickers and other. What they've done to Delhi, in Delhi and most cities, is they're privatizing waste, and that's one of the most tragic things I think that is happening in the economy for the poor and the urban poor. Because rag picking was the one thing that I could enter into with the very poorest, the most disadvantaged, because there was no. Now they're giving it out to large contractors who are stopping people from rag picking also. So what we're doing is that we're closing all opportunities for economic activity without the support of the state for the private sector of the poor. And we're calling that economic growth as well.
I just want to say before I need to go that I really value this opportunity to be with people I respect, and I think this is great. And actually, there's a whole lot of things we agree on. There may be sort of finer points here and there.
And the dialogues
I think the critical thing is governance, and I'm not seeing any change in that happening. I just don't see
this
that
question
happening.
of
I don't
how
have
do
that
we
faith.
change that? Is
I think you've got to get new. I think there is a huge insecurity in the people inside the administration. You are originally from that
they have
part.
failed the country most profoundly. I think that is.
We need to scrap that system.
Yes, but
we have to go out. We have to go out and recruit the best people for the best job.
No, but how does this work? You see, I'll tell you,
Why not?
because
Why do you have to have this service and that service and that service? No, don't have to increase. People will do public service. It is not about money.
But
it is
Tarun, first reclaim the idea of government for public service.
Absolutely, government for public service.
Then let's start with that, and then you'll find people, and then have an open system.
And there are so many young people who are willing to work. Even people who are retiring from different industries and all are willing to give their time for public service. We've done this, we've done that. I want to do something useful now. You can create a volunteer force of capable managers who will take charge of different things.
But if they are given no power or authority,
is the government
they must be given the authority to execute, not the authority to make policy, but authority to execute.
But how do you make that happen? Look, see, we're talking about agriculture.
You appoint a new chief executive of the National Highway Authority of India, who is not necessarily.
You get an example. One man done a great job. You just see one good
There are
leader.
good people in this country. There are competent people in this country.
But
we have to bring them into public service.
Actual decision makers.
What is the way
really
in which you
amazing.
push the incentive structure in government so that they accept this and allow this? That's what I'm asking. Agriculture people are talking about. Now listen, they know what to do.
I want to go back to Indira Gandhi.
Farmers Commission gave very detailed recommendations,
very
cold storage, everything. They've listed it all out. What does the government do?
Listen.
They want status quo.
What did they do? They created a committee to examine the recommendations.
So, Jayati, tell me,
because they don't want to take decisions.
But
and they have no domain knowledge.
So how do you do that?
But my reading of this is that whether it's the BJP government or the UPA government, that all are thinking right now in the most highest, whether it's the Prime Minister or Chidambaram or Montek, and I think if the BJP came in, it would be the same, is that we are so concerned with what India looks to the Western world.
Yes.
That we are
perception management.
but that's the only thinking that's driving. So you're not interested in farms because it's not glamorous. You're not interested in crafts because it's not glamorous. You're not interested in small and medium enterprises. It's not glamorous, and you're not certainly interested in low-cost housing because it's of no interest to the Western world.
But otherwise, when you have 5% growth, why would we go for road shows outside?
World class cities it should be a city where the poor don't have to sleep on the streets.
Absolutely.